Nick Kyrgios is one of the most impressive people in tennis history. It's not really because of his undeniable talent, which has arguably been largely unfulfilled, but what amazes me about Kyrgios is how he's become one of the sport's biggest household names despite never cracking the world's top 10 or lifting a big singles title. Yet he's the fourth most followed active person on Instagram with 4.2 million at the time of me recording this video. Kyrgios' current streak of relevancy is even more impressive when you consider how he hasn't won a professional tennis match in over 2 years. During this time of him rehabbing multiple injuries, Kyrgios has remained in the spotlight as a tennis media personality. He hosts his video podcast series Good Trouble, interviewing high-profile celebrities like Mike Tyson, John McEnroe, and Gordon Ramsay. Kyrgios has also landed cozy commentating gigs, calling matches at the Australian Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open for ESPN and the BBC. Kyrgios' analysis and insights have been widely praised by both fans and reporters who commend the Aussie for his fresh and nuanced perspectives on the sport. But Nick's time in the commentating booth hasn't been without controversy. During this year's US Open, the 29-year-old made headlines for his one-sided beef with Italian Jannik Sinner after he revealed that he previously tested positive for a banned steroid but was soon after cleared. Sinner fans obviously were not happy with Nick, but Kyrgios faced even greater backlash from the wider tennis community after involving Jannik's girlfriend, Kalinskaya, in a very tasteless X/Twitter post. Nick has a track record of making misogynistic and tasteless comments which are often overlooked. He's literally branded as tennis's beloved troublemaker. Many people said that he brings more eyes to tennis and thus he's good for the sport. But it begs the question, does tennis really need Nick Kyrgios that badly to continue letting his toxic behavior go unchecked? Hey, my name is Christian Bassnight and welcome to Christian's Court, where I cover tennis from all angles. If you haven't yet already, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so you're notified whenever I post more edgier commentary videos like these, as well as other regular tennis news content. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not making this video to bash Nick Kyrgios. I acknowledge that he has dealt with numerous mental health challenges and he even contemplated suicide during a dark period in 2019. Some of that is a result of bullying that Nick received as a child due to his weight. Now, that is not to justify his behavior by any means, but it is good to have some added context when delving into his character. Giving a brief rundown of Kyrgios' initial career as an actual tennis player, he burst onto the scene during the 2014 Wimbledon Championships as a 19-year-old wild card, upsetting world number 1 Rafael Nadal en route to the quarterfinals. That upset thrust Kyrgios into the spotlight as people were enamored by this flashy teen whose edgy aura dominated center court. Kyrgios admitted that the surge of attention after that win over Nadal was challenging as he struggled to cope with becoming an overnight tennis superstar. Despite his grapples with celebrity, Kyrgios has shown a few flashes of his limitless potential and talent throughout his 10 years of competing on the Pro Tour. He scored wins over all Big Three members Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and he has claimed 7 career titles, 4 of which are 500 level, but none above that level. Kyrgios' most notable achievement is him finishing runner-up at the 2022 Wimbledon Championships, falling to Novak Djokovic in the finals, although that tournament probably warrants a small asterisk next to it because the Russian and Belarusian players were barred from competing in that year's championship, so points were even awarded. Plus, Kyrgios received a walkover into the finals from Rafael Nadal, who was dealing with an abdominal injury. So the only top 30 player that he actually beat en route to the final was a 4th-seeded Stefanos Tsitsipas, whose weakest surface is the grass. But regardless, Kyrgios was playing his best tennis in 2022. He won the Australian Open doubles title earlier that season with his good buddy Thanasi Kokkinakis. He also scored 2 wins over then world number 1 Daniil Medvedev that summer, making the US Open quarterfinals for the first time in his career. Kyrgios has not played an official tennis match since June of 2023, dealing with knee, ankle, wrist, and foot injuries. He's undergone surgeries on both his knee and wrist, which have not made life easy for the injury-prone Kyrgios. Nick intends to come back and compete eventually when he's healthy under a protected ranking of 21 in the world, but he says that he does not really see himself playing for much longer, about 1 or 2 more years. Now, Nick has been keeping himself very busy within the tennis world during his time off. He made his broadcasting debut as a guest commentator and analyst on Tennis Channel for the 2023 ATP Finals, and then he made his ESPN debut 2 months later when he commentated at the 2024 Australian Open. Nick did Wimbledon commentator for both ESPN and the BBC, which was well received. And at the US Open, Kyrgios worked as a pundit, reporter, and co-commentator for ESPN. And once again, that was well received, very well received by a lot of fans. The Aussie also did post-match interviews and social media bits for the US Open. So as a tennis fan, you basically could not escape Nick Kyrgios, even if you tried during those 2 weeks. But during this US Open, Kyrgios made headlines, but not for the best reasons. He became public enemy number one amongst Italian tennis fans by being the most outspoken against Jannik Sinner still being allowed to compete despite testing positive twice for cholesterol, a banned steroid, earlier in the spring. Kyrgios said that the cholesterol was performance enhancing and that Sinner should be banned for at least 2 years, regardless of whether the contamination was intentional or not. However, the report said that the amount administered was so minuscule that it wouldn't have even enhanced Sinner's performance. Jannik was also able to get off because he was able to readily pinpoint the contamination, which came from his physiotherapist. Kyrgios justified his tirade against Sinner because he said he wanted to keep the sport clean, but to me, his gripe with Jannik was way deeper than this. First, he was making shady digs at Jannik before the news of the positive test even dropped. And to me, I immediately thought that Kyrgios felt some type of way about Sinner dating his ex, Kalinskaya, who is a professional tennis player on the WTA Tour. Kyrgios and Kalinskaya dated for a few months, but they broke up in 2020. Kalinskaya made a few cryptic IG story posts, seemingly calling Kyrgios an energy vampire and that he's not a bad boy, but simply a bad person. My suspicions about Kyrgios being pressed over Kalinskaya were pretty much confirmed after he posted a poll throwing more shade to Jannik, to which a fan of his jokingly replied with an old picture of him and Kalinskaya. Kyrgios then replied in a now deleted tweet, simply second serve, which sent X/Twitter into an uproar, with many interpreting that as calling Kalinskaya his sloppy seconds. Kyrgios defended himself against the backlash, essentially saying that he was provoked to say what he did. That second tweet justifying what he said is weird as hell to me because Kyrgios talks about people dealing with consequences, but that fan, the one who posted that picture, isn't the one that's being offended by what he said. It's Jannik, and more importantly, Kalinskaya. Like, that right there just shows you that he is not the brightest in the tool shed and that he still has a lot of maturing left to do. Regardless of that foul tweet and Kyrgios' lack of an apology, Nick was an analyst for the women's singles final that same day, to many people's surprise and disdain. During the Open, Kyrgios was questioned by a fan of why he wasn't dressed up more professionally in a suit like his fellow ESPN colleagues, and Kyrgios replied, "Because I do what I want." And that Kalinskaya second serve tweet is the result of Kyrgios feeling empowered to do just whatever he wants, because according to him, he's good for the sport whether he plays or commentates. So a big question that many people might have is, why is Nick Kyrgios so relevant? Why is he amongst the most relevant people in the sport, despite not accomplishing as much as some of his lesser known peers? Well, people just simply love something different, and Nick Kyrgios is very different in the world of tennis. Nick said he loves basketball more than he does tennis, and he brings some of that NBA flair over to the tennis courts with their dry fit compression shirts under the sleeveless tanks. And then Kyrgios also wears basketball shoes while walking out on the court before changing to his regular tennis shoes before the actual warm-up. Admittedly, Kyrgios is also just entertaining to watch play. He has the booming serve and huge forehand, and also has a knack for trick shots, tweeners, and underarm serves. You just don't know what to expect whenever you watch a Nick Kyrgios match. There's a chance you might see the hot-headed Aussie go off the rails and smash a few rackets, berating umpire or fans, or even his opponents right across the net. Kyrgios' biggest controversy was undoubtedly in 2015 when he told Stanislav Wawrinka that his mate Thanasi Kokkinakis had relations with Stan's then-girlfriend Donna Vekic during their Rogers Cup match. Kyrgios was fined and he later apologized, and while Nick received quite a bit of criticism for those statements, quite a few fans also defended the 20-year-old, giving him a pass due to his younger age and him still needing more time to mature. But now Nick is about to be 30 years old. What is his excuse for making such childish responses like that when he could have just simply said nothing at all? The thing about Kyrgios is that he loves to play the victim card. Like, if a player acts out or smashes a racket, he'll be the first to say, "Oh, if I did that, I'd be crucified. These double standards, man." But there is a double standard when it comes to Nick Kyrgios. He has the unique privilege of getting away with some questionable and outright horrible things, but still having a flourishing career within the tennis world because, once again, he has a brand of being tennis's bad boy and most beloved troublemaker. I have to mention that assault case brought against Kyrgios by his ex-girlfriend Chiara Passati. Nick pled guilty to shoving Passati to the ground during a heated argument around 2021, but he was not convicted of any criminal charges. Kyrgios has also been accused of being sexist Kyrgios, which really wouldn't be too far-fetched considering how he was a big follower and fanboy of self-proclaimed misogynist Andrew Tate. Nick has since distanced himself from Tate, especially after Andrew and his brother faced allegations of assault, human trafficking, and forming a criminal gang. But Kyrgios' Tate denouncement comes off as more of a PR move orchestrated by the BBC after the broadcast corporation faced backlash for including the Aussie in its Wimbledon pundit lineup. Nick previously said that he low-key loves the Tate brothers, which should come as really no surprise judging from some of his past statements. Nick has expressed opposition to women receiving equal prize money to the men at the majors quite a few times. In a 2023 interview with The Athletic, Kyrgios said, "I played for 4 hours at the Australian Open, and then Alina Svitolina played for like 40 minutes, and we got paid the same." Using far fewer words, in fact just a simple laughing emoji, Kyrgios essentially saying those same sentiments when Iga Swiatek defeated Anastasia Potapova in 40 minutes in the Rolling Girls 4th round this year. That's real rich coming from a man who lost to Taylor Fritz in 51 minutes in their Cincinnati Open match just 2 years ago. Around this time at Rolling Girls, Kyrgios criticized the supposed lack of depth on the women's tour when this account posted about Aryna Sabalenka and how she hadn't dropped a set at the majors at that point. Once again, very weird considering how Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer had a chokehold on the slams for dang near 2 decades. During the 2023 Rolling Girls Championships, fellow ESPN pundit Renee Stubbs hyped up the women's semifinal and final and said that they were more entertaining than the men's, which I believe she was 100% correct in saying, judging from looking at the material. Renee wasn't trying to talk down on men's tennis, rather she was trying to defend women's tennis against those people like Kyrgios who constantly try to diminish it. Nick, of course, chimed in with a classic immature laughing emoji, essentially saying that he disagrees with Renee's statement. See, the women's tennis at that year's Rolling Girls, as far as the semifinals and the finals went, were more entertaining than the men's, and that's okay. Sometimes the women are more entertaining than the men, and then sometimes the men are more entertaining than the women at the slam. Sometimes it just juggles. But what I get from Kyrgios is that the women not only play less overall than the men in slams, but they are less entertaining and thus deserve less. That's why it's so bizarre to me that a women's slam champion and a proponent for equal pay, Naomi Osaka, would even align herself with someone like Kyrgios despite his questionable track record. Nick was the first athlete to sign with Osaka's co-founded sports agency Evolve. The pair are also occasional practice partners, and Osaka's media company Hanakuma actually produces Kyrgios' Good Trouble interview show. And then Caroline Garcia, another women's player and proponent for equal prize money, literally posted a podcast episode with Kyrgios the same day that he made that Kalinskaya second serve tweet. That's why I respect Andrea Pekovic, a commentator and former WTA player, for criticizing Kyrgios and his recent actions in her US Open Substack blog post. She said, "Nick could be truly fantastic on TV, but he keeps self-sabotaging with misogynistic nonsense. His content is great. Unfortunately, he taints it with his online persona. The one thing that makes or breaks somebody on TV is their authenticity and whether people choose to believe them. Nick says good things about women's tennis on air, but if he disparages them online, at one point people will stop believing him on air too." Andrea is correct, but we have to be real and recognize too that a lot of people in the world feel the same exact way that Nick does, and unfortunately it's the world that we live in. Kyrgios has quite a few haters, but he kind of also has a large fan base that has only grown after he became friends with Novak Djokovic. Now, Djokovic fans defend Nick as if he's Novak himself, because to them the establishment is always trying to silence and defame Kyrgios. Also, ESPN knows Nick will attract more viewers because people will tune in just to hear what he has to say. And my college roommate, who isn't a big fan of tennis, is a Nick Kyrgios fan because he admires how Nick isn't afraid to speak his mind, while other players might try to be a bit too squeaky clean and professional. He's simply deemed more authentic and honestly unhinged, which can be refreshing to a lot of people who aren't too fond of this quote-unquote PC era. I get all that, but at some point we gotta draw a line. Like, there should be no reason that Kyrgios gets to commentate a women's slam final the same exact day as making such inappropriate tweets about a top women's player. If Kyrgios doesn't believe women's tennis players should earn the same as their male counterparts, then why are y'all paying him to analyze women's tennis matches? And then why y'all having him do encore interviews with women's tennis players? Is all very strange to me. That commentating or analyst spot could be given to someone who actually respects women's tennis players and female athletes equally. All of this is unfortunate because, drama aside, Kyrgios as a commentator would be great for tennis. He brings a fresh new perspective that the old heads, like he even said himself, just simply don't bring. To me, he is like the modern John McEnroe in terms of his mainstream appeal, but he's better than McEnroe to me because Nick actually knows what he's talking about most of the time. I want so bad to enjoy Nick and his commentating, but these recent Twitter rants and tirades are making it very difficult, and I know that a lot of other people feel the same way. Kyrgios himself said that we're going to be dealing with him for a long time, as he plans to have a tennis media career after his imminent retirement from competing on the tour. But the big tennis broadcasting entities have a problem on their hands with him, which they created, to be totally honest. Instead of tapping into younger, more diverse voices like myself, they're hinging all their bets on Nick. And it's not to overlook other talented commentators in the game like Chris Eubanks, who did an excellent job with ESPN during this US Open. And then Andrea Pekovic, who I mentioned earlier, does a phenomenal job too. Coco Vandeweghe is another new voice. She's there, unfortunately. But it's clear that ESPN is positioning Kyrgios to be this next John McEnroe in the booth, which is a very, very risky gamble. Will he fire off at the mouth online or even on the air and do something even worse and be eventually forced to cut ties? Or maybe the power really is in Kyrgios' hands and he can truly do whatever he wants without ever losing his platform. I guess only time will tell. What are your thoughts on Nick Kyrgios' media career? Are you a fan of his and believe him being this modern Johnny Mac can help grow the sport? Or do you think having him in these spaces is a mistake, given his continued track record of questionable behavior? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below and subscribe and click the notification bell again so you're notified whenever I post more content like this. Thank you all so much for watching and for your support, and I'll see y'all next time here on Christian's Court.